This is Secret America with your hosts, Jack Danger and James Clary.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Jack Danger along with James Clary, and we have a very special guest for you today. He's here to talk about his new film, The Dragon's Prophecy. We're going to go ahead and bring in Dinesh D'Souza. So welcome, Dinesh. Thank you for coming here today.
Hey, guys. It's a pleasure. Great to join you. And hey, looking forward to this.
Well, the honor is all ours, the pleasure. It's great to have you here. It's amazing. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you because you're one of our favorite filmmakers. 2000 Mules, Police State, and all the others are excellent. And it's great that you could come on here and we could talk to everybody about your new film, which I'm going to put up the poster right here. It's The Dragon's Prophecy. And it's an excellent film, and I think people will really like it, and it's something that they'll really enjoy. I mean, you always make great films anyway, so it's going to be something really good. And one of the first things, though, that I wanted to ask you is what is The Dragon's Prophecy? What does the title represent, and what is the movie about?
So the title represents a passage in the book of Revelation, which describes a massive conflict, a war between a dragon representing the devil and a woman representing Israel who is pregnant representing Jesus, the Messiah. So it's kind of a way of suggesting that underneath our political wars and culture wars, there is a spiritual war. And in fact, that war, like, who are the combatants? It's God versus the devil. And this has been raging through time. It started at the beginning of time itself. And in some ways, we try to interpret what's happening in the world, in Israel and Hamas, but also more broadly as part of this eternal conflict. In other words, we apply a sort of spiritual or biblical lens to the world. Very unique for me, by the way. As you know, my films are largely secular. They're mostly about the meaning of America. But this film kind of moves in a different direction. You're in archaeological sites in Israel. You're digging stuff out of the ground. You're looking at ways in which the clash between Israel and Hamas resembles ancient battles between the Israelites and the Philistines. By the way, this is like circa, this is 3,000 years ago, 1000 BC. So it's a really mind-expanding, in some ways even kind of a mind-blowing film. But it shows ultimately that these conflicts aren't just about what's happening like way over there, that there's a spiritual battle that affects you, it affects me. At the end of the day, there are choices that you and I have to make.
Dinesh, I love the film. It's really interesting. And as a history buff, I majored in history in college. I found Israel and the Palestinians with the Philistines, the ancient enemy of the Israelis. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the Philistines inhabited the area that is now called the Gaza Strip. It was then called Philistia, but Philistia was made up of 5 cities, and the most notable, Gaza. Gaza is mentioned in the Bible. So let's look at an interesting analogy, because the name Philistine and the name Palestine, same word. It's somehow been transported through history. Now, Samson is one of the great heroes of the Bible. He's this big, strong guy. He represents the strength of Israel. He's captured by the Philistines. And what do? The first thing they do is they blind him. So they blind him exactly the way that Israel was blinded on October 7th. Number 2, they drag him back, the Bible says, to Gaza. And then, according to the Bible, the people of Gaza screamed, "Strip him and bring him out for our entertainment." I mean, think about this. Right after October 7th, hostages were taken to Gaza. They were stripped. They were paraded. People are dancing around them, shouting Allahu Akbar. So the point here is that there is a very interesting similarity, not just of the name, but of tactics between what's happening now and what happened 3,000 years ago. In a weird way, you could say Samson was the first hostage of Gaza. And so when you look at it that way, you realize that October 7th isn't just like a political event, just another act of terrorism. It's kind of a biblical event if you're open to seeing it that way.
So
Go ahead,
James.
Well, I was just going to say, I have one thing I just got to ask you about, and it's on the subject, but it has to do when you said they blinded Samson and Israel was blinded on October 7th. Some of the critics of the current actions of the Israeli state wonder why it took so many hours for the IDF to respond to the attack. And in your film, you actually, I believe you had a recording of a Hamas terrorist celebrating. It was just horrid listening to that. I mean, it was awful. But what do you say to critics, Dinesh, that say, what took so long for the IDF to get there?
I'd say a couple of things. I mean, there's always been a suspicion whenever you have these terrifying attacks. You might recall there's a literature about how did FDR know about Pearl Harbor, for example, before it happened? Yeah. Did Bush know about 9/11? Was this something that they, in some ways, they not necessarily encouraged, but they knew was happening? They didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I think that the reason that these theories don't hold up is because there are too many people inside the country, politically on the other side, who would be really eager to expose it. So there was a massive cleavage, a divide in Israeli society between the right and the left. It was very similar, by the way, to what was happening with Trump. There was lawfare going on against Netanyahu. There was a fight over the Supreme Court. So I think that the Israelis dropped the ball. They were too preoccupied internally with that. They were not keeping an eye on Hamas. Remember, Hamas has been in power since 2005. So there was no reason to believe that they would do anything right now. And I think the audacity and frankly, the brilliance of this Hamas attack, where they come in on gliders. I mean, this is just like out of a space science fiction movie. So quite honestly, I think they outsmarted Israel on October 7th, and it's going to produce a bitter recrimination and investigation later. I would say that this unity in Israel right now is kind of temporary. It won't last forever, and there's going to have to be some accounting for what went wrong on October 7th.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So tell me, how did the book shape how you made the film? How did the book shape how you made the film? And what made you think of this book when these things happened?
So the book is an ingenious kind of biblical analysis. And Jonathan Cahn's audience is largely an audience that accepts the authority of the Bible to speak about these questions. Now, my audience is mixed. I obviously do have a Christian audience, but I also have a secular audience. I have people in my audience who are going to say, well, this is all very interesting, but quite honestly, how do we know the Bible's reliable? How do we know that people like Abraham and King David and the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah were real people? Even a guy like Pontius Pilate, until pretty recently, he existed in the Bible, but there was no non-biblical corroboration of him. This is the reason why I've got a segment on biblical archaeology, because I'm essentially in the archaeological pit. I'm pulling out stones and seals from the ground. We're able to see for ourselves that whatever you think of the theology of the Bible, or whether you believe the miracles, I'm affirming the historicity of the Bible by showing that, look, David really built a palace and I'm standing in it. You can see the 10-foot walls, and seals are coming out of the ground and they have Isaiah written on them. So Isaiah was a real guy. And we know exactly when he lived and which king he served. So what I find interesting about the archaeology is that not only does it support the historicity of the Bible, it also demonstrates indubitably the presence of the Jews in Israel going back 4,000 years. So you really can't argue about it. When you say things like Israel's a colonizer, I mean, think about the stupidity of that. They have been as long in that land as the Indians have been in India. The Indians can't colonize India. They've been there, from the beginning. And so that's the point. That's the way in which the biblical stuff and the political stuff converge. So Cahn was sort of a late addition to this film. I began on October 7th. I began with all the footage of October 7th. I had already been exposed to the biblical archaeology. I would say what Khan really provided was the element of biblical prophecy, because this idea that, I thought I had the past, I have the present, which is the war right now, but where is this like going? Is this ever going to be fixed? What is the significance of the time we're living in? This is where the prophetic element, I think, is just very intellectually interesting and provocative. So it's a very nice added element to the film. And then, of course, just as a filmmaker, the idea of a dragon spewing fire, this to me was like awesome. I knew I could do a lot with it cinematically, and so I have.
Yeah, you broke it down at first that this truly is a battle between good and evil, and little off topic, but not really. I'm sure you knew Charlie Kirk. I know you knew him, and his assassination. Dinesh, I have never seen anything like that memorial service. I've never felt closer to my God, who happens to be Jesus Christ, than watching that memorial. And I felt a spirit literally sweeping across our nation. And I really applied it watching your film about this battle for good and evil. I think a lot of people have really broken down the current conditions in America, leave Israel and Palestine aside, but we really feel like that's what's happening. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then what's happened in the ensuing weeks, highlights that.
I could not agree more. I mean, I was sitting in the fifth row in the front in that memorial. It was an awesome event. I love the fact that the cabinet ministers, the Trump cabinet, was unhesitating in proclaiming not just generically God, but specifically Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I've never heard anything like it. And not only that, but I think that there is a spirit of revival brewing. I want this film to be a part of that. Obviously, I put the film together before that, but it has that spirit. In other words, it ends with, my wife and I are being baptized in the Jordan River. We're like, down we go. And the cameras are in the water, with us. And so the idea here is not just to make, some of my earlier films have been like horror films where you leave like days, the country is gone, they've stolen the election, and that was appropriate in the Biden era and even the Obama era. But I think now what we're looking for is a way out of all this. And a spiritual path, no less than a political path. And so the film really engages both. I mean, I've got one-on-one with Huckabee, I've got one-on-one with Netanyahu, and I engage them in a very candid way. Like I'll say, Tucker said to Ted Cruz that the Jews of today are not necessarily the ones descended from Abraham. What do you say about that? Boom. And so I'm using the film as a mechanism to really push the envelope here and engage this debate head on. So it's a very timely film, but it's also kind of timeless in a way.
Yeah, it definitely is. So you said you had an interview with Netanyahu. What was your key takeaway from that interview?
My interview strategy is really simple. I see a lot of these guys, and they tend to be very rehearsed. No surprise. I mean, Netanyahu is like under siege everywhere he goes. People are like, screaming at him. So he's very prepared. He's very rehearsed. He's a little stiff. So my idea was always to, like, not in a bad way, throw him off his stride. Like, I'll ask him a question like, okay, so what's your take on Jesus? Right? You got a Jewish guy, he's head of a Jewish state. It's like, comment on Jesus. That's not going to be something he's heard from the Jerusalem Post or Jerusalem News Service. So he's gonna open up, and then I'm going to pull him into the current debate, have him speak directly to the issues at hand, even the issue of genocide. I mean, look, there is no excuse for killing civilians on either side, and there's a moral horror here and a moral ambiguity of it. I think one of the things the film brings out very well is it does not diminish the civilian horror on either side. But what it does say is that one of the real features of true evil is to force good people into a position where they seem to have no alternative but to do evil. I quote the former Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. She goes, "We can forgive the Arabs for killing our children." She goes, "But we can't forgive them for forcing us to kill their children." I mean, what a statement, right? It kind of makes you think. And it is a commentary, really, I think, on the bottomless evil of the dragon. And that's where the reason the devil belongs in this movie is part of our theme is the devil cannot defeat God, right? So what does the devil do? He always looks for the things that are important to God, and his idea is to go ruin those. That's why in the Garden of Eden, he picks Adam and Eve. They haven't done anything to him. What's his grievance with them? No grievance. But his point is, if I can take the cherished creation of God, ruin them, ha ha ha, I've got the last laugh on God. And in the same way, I think if the Jews are seen as God's chosen people, you would think that the devil is going to have some plans to punish, humiliate, and destroy those people from the river to the sea. I mean, we're hearing the slogans of the dragon, right? And Christians are, spiritual Israelites. I mean, according to the Bible, we are grafted into the kingdom of God. And the Old Testament, in that sense, is grafted onto the new, kind of like the branch of a tree that grows further out. So Christians are no less, I think, a target than Jews of the dragon.
Yeah. One thing that I thought the interview with him was powerful, and I'm really glad that you asked him about Jesus. He also brought up the point of the number of civilians killed by America in World War II and every war. But, I wanted to get your take on a comment that Charlie Kirk, the aforementioned Charlie Kirk, made, where he said, sometimes I think it's more difficult for me to criticize my donors, I think speaking primarily of Israel, Jewish donors, than it is for Israelis to criticize their government. And just real quick, the Tucker thing, how does Netanyahu and, square the idea that, can we criticize the current Israeli government without criticizing the Jewish people of the Bible, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, look, I think that I'm very careful in this film not to fall into the foolishness where if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semite, or you criticize the Jews. Nobody's forced to like Israel, and nobody's even forced to like Jews. You can have your beef with any group. To me, this is the way to think of anti-Semitism is much more narrowly. And that is, if you have a global standard that you apply to everybody, and then for some mysterious reason, that standard goes away, and you now have a different standard when it comes to Jews and Israel, then I think your motives are rightly suspect, right? So let's say, for example, someone says the United States was attacked on Pearl Harbor, and they killed, let's just say, 2,000 civilians in that attack. It was a military target, but obviously civilians died as well. Mm-hmm. And then and someone says, you know what? I think it's really important, according to Christian just war theory, that America at that point should have gone to Japan and killed no more than 2,000 civilians in Japan. No atomic bombs, no invasion of Japan, no declaration of World War II. They hit you, you hit them back, but tit for tat, but no more than that. And then they said, and we're applying the same logic to Israel. Then I go, okay, I get it. That is your moral analysis of the situation. You're perfectly justified in arguing that and making your case. Now, I don't agree with that case, and I think most Americans don't. And the only debate in America in World War II was, should the atomic bombs have been dropped, or should the United States have launched a massive land invasion of Japan? I mean, think of the number of casualties, including civilian casualties, that would cause. So if you're on board with that, and then when it comes to October 7th, you suddenly have a different view. Or you think after 9/11, it's perfectly fine for us to have gone over there, bombarded the Taliban, bombings, and, essentially level Kabul to the ground. We don't even count the civilian casualties, and that's okay. But after October 7th, it's not okay. Then I'm like, listen, you appear suddenly to be changing the rules of the game. So I think that we need an intelligent debate here that is not captive to these foolish doctrines that you can't criticize Israel or any of that. Now, I will tell you, because I know something about the Charlie Kirk situation, it's not unique. Charlie Kirk was in a situation where, like any nonprofit group, his funders and his constituents were two different sets of people, right? The constituents are young people who are increasingly anti-Israel. And the thing to realize about his funders, a lot of whom I know, by the way, it's not all Jews. It's a mixture of Jews and evangelical Christians, but these are older people. They're the mainstream of the Republican Party. They go back to the Reagan days. They're generally pro-Israel, including the Christians, the Christian voters. So Charlie Kirk was like, which way do I go? If I go in this direction, I lose the donors to a degree. If I go toward them, then I risk losing my young people are going to be seduced by Nick Fuentes. They're all going to end up in his camp. So Charlie was honestly like trying to negotiate this.
Yeah.
And I totally understand it. I've seen this happen 5 times at nonprofit organizations I've been involved with. It was the case at AEI when I was at the American Enterprise Institute. Look, the donors were big businesses, right? And the constituents, I mean, all of us were like free market guys. Yeah. So a lot of times these businesses would be like, we are all on board with the free market, but if the federal government is going to give us subsidies, we're for it. Like we love farm subsidies if we have big farming companies. And we love automobile subsidies if we're investors in Chrysler and Ford. Right. So this is the clash again between our donors. So this is not new at all. I think what is foolish is the idea that somehow something like this, which is very normal, somehow caused Israel to go assassinate Charlie Kirk. That is absurd. And so even Candace is like, look at that photo. I think I see a pipe. Maybe a Mossad guy crawled out of the pipe. Maybe he's the guy who took the shot. I'm like, look, I mean, you're out of your mind. And not only that, but what I'm saying is, it's very bad what you're doing. Right now, we, the right, we kind of have Antifa on the run. We have all these trans militants on the run. It looks like they were in a Discord group predicting that something bad was going to happen to Charlie the next day. So it's possible there was a conspiracy there. Just when we're on the heels of getting them, people on our own side come out and go, it was the Jews. I mean, this is almost like giving this guy a courtroom defense. He's like, you think I did it? No, it was the Jews. Let me get that tape from Candace Owens. So I'm a little disturbed, it seems to me, that we are creating a rift on our own side. It's not good for the country. Forget about Israel. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the MAGA movement. It's not good for Trump. It's not good for what we're trying to accomplish right now.
Agreed.
You're absolutely right. I mean, right now we're seems like that different factions of the right are going head to head for different conspiracies based on your own beliefs, and it's crazy the way things are happening, because most of the time the simplest answer is the correct answer, and that's pretty much what this is. But I want to ask you, well, actually, real quick before we go on to anything else, can you just tell everybody when your movie comes out and when they can see it?
It's out in theaters, about 400 theaters in 2 days, October 6th. October 6th and October 8th. So it's the 2 days alongside October 7th. And see it in the theater if you can, because, I make these movies in a very dramatic, cinematic way that they're made for the theater. So if you can possibly see it that way, the experience is incomparable. But hey, a lot of people like to watch at home. The very next day, October 9th, streaming, DVDs will land in your box. So go to the website. It's the Dragons, plural, the dragonsProphecyFilm.com. Buy the movie tickets on the website. You can't buy them at the theater. You have to buy them on the website, and then go with your buddies, go with your family, go check it out. If you want to wait till October 9th, next Thursday, no problem. You can watch at home. The film will be streaming on a number of platforms, including, by the way, Salem Now. Salem is my media partner in making this film.
Go to the theater. I got to tell you, I found my life partner and true love of my life. Our second date was to Obama's America in the theater, one of your films. And we went to see it together, and we knew we were politically connected and romantically. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Hey, I love it.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Movies have a certain kind of power. I don't know if the movie helped, by the way, in the moves you're making on your now wife and life partner. But a movie has emotional power in addition to intellectual power. That's why I love this format. It kind of brings the head and the heart together.
Especially your films. Your films are very intelligent, but also powerful, and they make everybody think. I mean, you saw when the 2000 Mules came out, that got everybody up in arms, because then they could actually see what's going on. Seeing it is totally different than hearing about it, because if it's out of sight, then it's out of mind.
Jack, this is such a critical point, and I apply it to this film as well, right? In 2000 Mules, if you saw me telling you, let me tell you all about election fraud, you would be like, well, maybe he's right, maybe he's not. But if I can put you on the scene in the 2020 election, and I can show you the middle of the night, and some guy pulls up in a car, and it's dark, and he looks to the left and the right, make sure no one's watching him. He's got a big backpack, it's chock full of ballots. Then you can make your own decision, right? So similarly with this film, it begins, and you're like on the scene at October 7th, and not only that, you're seeing it not from the Israeli side. You're actually seeing it from the Hamas side. It's like you have a motorcycle with the Hamas guys and you're riding over the fence into Israel or into the kibbutzes. And the reason it's like that is because Hamas took the footage. Hamas filmed it. So as a result, I've been collecting this film for 2 years. I realize very few people have actually seen it. The Israeli government, I think, made a tactical blunder. They were like, let's just show it to some journalists. And they picked like journalists from Sky News and the BBC. I mean, left-wing propagandistic journalists who had no interest in any of this. So the film really begins with, this is what happened on October 7th. See it with your own eyes. And it pulls you right in from there.
Yeah. You know, I got to ask you, this drove me nuts. Jack, most everyone was convinced that the 2020 election was completely fraudulent. Your movie, I think, was one of the best testaments to that. Shortly after the film came out, you did an interview with Megyn Kelly. I don't know if you remember that, talking about your film.
Yep.
To this day, I have never heard Megyn Kelly, and the other one is Ben Shapiro. They will not say that the 2020 election was fraudulent. She almost dismissed what was in your film. What did you make of that?
Well, you know, look, there's a very conservative senator, good friend of mine. Right before I released the film, 2000 Mules, I texted him and I said, hey, come over to our house. Debbie and I would like to show you the film. And you make up your own mind as to what you think happened in the 2020 election. No reply. I'm like, I know the guy pretty well. I text him again. No reply. And then I thought about it and I realized, okay, I think I know what's going on. It's not that he's worried the film is false. He's actually worried the film is true. He's worried that if he comes and sees it, he now has to do something about it. But Republicans were running scared on two issues at the time, January 6th and the stolen election. Obviously, the two issues are connected. Mm-hmm. And many people who are trustworthy on our side and generally solid people, look, they're strong, but they're not strong enough. They wilted on those two issues. Now, some of them have backpedaled now, and some of them actually like to say, like, you know, oh yeah, I always said the election was stolen, but it was. But they didn't say it in 2021 when it really mattered, and when you could actually be thrown off social media platforms for saying it. And of course, we are being sued over this. I mean, you know that the film is explosively powerful when the left is going to deploy its lawfare, bring out its, you know, they've got a massive battery of attorneys going after us, one of the largest law firms in the world. So my point is, you have to fight these battles, and many people are not willing to do it. We are. And just because I want to be fearless on the side of truth. I mean, even on this issue, there are people like, Dinesh, you know, you've been friends with Tucker Carlson, you've known him for 30 years. Like, don't criticize him. But I'm like, look, you know, the problem here is that Tucker is operating kind of like a ventriloquist. And by that, I mean, he doesn't come out and say something. He'll have a guy on his show who says, yo, we should have allied with Hitler against Stalin. I'm like, what a statement. You know, are you going to defend that? Now,
Daryl Cooper, yeah.
Well, this was, of course, debated after World War II. No, it wasn't. After World War II, Patton said, having defeated Hitler, maybe we should go all the way to Moscow. That's a whole different thing than saying that we should have backed Hitler against Stalin. Hitler posed a much greater threat to us. Stalin was minding his own business. Hitler actually invaded Stalin. That was the Nazi invasion of Russia. Yeah. So these very incendiary statements, and it's an embarrassment to me because, look, all my career, I've been an iconoclast. I've tried to question the narrative, but I always try to do it responsibly with facts. My films take you on a journey. I try to give you both sides of the issue before I come out with my view. And I think what I'm seeing now is something that mimics that style, but is bogus. Like, you know, like even Candace is like, I'm going to conduct a personal investigation that will reveal the true killer of Charlie Kirk. And then this investigation, I can tell you right away, is going to go nowhere. It's going to produce no interesting facts, a lot of like sly questions about this and that. None of them will ever be resolved. And then the moment you say you're making an accusation, she'll say, no, I'm not. No, listen to what I exactly said. I said, could it be? I said, it needs to be looked at. And then Candace invites her audience to look at it as if they have suddenly become investigators, as if they're going to do what the FBI can't do. I mean, the whole thing is like, it's become a sort of a sick joke. And look, I get it. I mean, we don't trust the CDC. We don't trust the FBI. We've been lied to up and down. So I can see why a lot of young people are like, yeah, man, yes, and this is just another case. And same thing we heard, by the way, with the Epstein files. Maybe Trump's in on it. Maybe he's the one who set the whole thing up. Again, if you do this responsibly, I don't think any question is out of bounds. But if you're doing it to poison and divide our side, then you're not on our team. I mean, you're hurting our cause. And if your attacks on Israel are helping radical Islam, if you're helping the global caliphate, if you're helping the people who, frankly, they don't even care about the Palestinians. What they're trying to do is infiltrate Europe, infiltrate Australia. I live in Texas. They want to take over our school boards. They want to move into our suburbs. I mean, we are facing a real problem here. Israel is certainly not the problem. And in some ways over there, they're doing work that we don't want to do. I mean, could we have figured out how to run that pager move where these Hamas guys are, hey, Abdul, you ready for your attack? Boom. I mean, this is genius. I wish our CIA pulled that off, but I don't think they're capable of it.
Dinesh, Jack and I, something we talk about all the time is justice. That was one of the key issues, or lack of. And do you think some of this, you're talking about the Candace work, which I've followed, and the Tucker comments, et cetera, but you're right. We've been lied to by everyone. So we get this administration that promised us these things. And I got to be honest, Dinesh, I don't feel like we've seen a lot of movement on the very issues that we'd like to see movement on from our DOJ. And people are pissed. I mean, they're tired of waiting. What do you think?
I'll be honest with you. I think that Trump went kind of all in on Matt Gaetz. But that blew up in his face. And so what he did is, which often happens, right? I mean, we saw it in the Supreme Court. I mean, you go for Judge Bork, you don't get Judge Bork, and you end up with like this invertebrate Kennedy character who is a much more, weak-kneed individual. Pam Bondi is very loyal to Trump, but Pam Bondi does not have the fire that a lot of the other cabinet people have. You can see Trump knows that. He sent that irritable note to her that he accidentally posted on his social, like, Pam, awesome. What are you doing? So you can see there's an effort to move things, and there's obviously a sluggishness over there. So I don't actually hold it against Bongino or Cash. I think they would like to move the ball, but let's remember they report to Pam Bondi. So I think this is the reason for the slow movement at the DOJ. And I totally share your exasperation with it.
And something did happen recently, though, that I wanted to get your comments on. And I would, towards the end of the show, I'd just like to take a question or two, from the live chat. But first, I want to get your comments on, so James Comey was recently indicted by a grand jury. Now, he hasn't been arrested, even though Roger Stone, for the same charges, was, had a raid, FBI raid at 6 a.m. on his house, taken out in handcuffs, 29 FBI agents in full tactical gear. He was arrested. However, James Comey has still got till October 9th or whatever to turn himself in. How do you feel about, first of all, the lack of, urgency to get him in? I mean, he should be handcuffed and perp walked just like everybody else. At least that's what I think. And also, how do you feel about him being indicted, knowing that he was the man that put you behind bars for something that was totally bogus?
Yeah, I gave $20,000 for a college friend of mine who was running for office. I now know, because I have information about my FBI file. The FBI, as soon as they saw that, they assigned $100,000 to investigate a $20,000 case. It was a political targeting. I was even identified in the file as like a high-profile critic of Obama. And of course, I just made this film, well, the one you saw, Obama's America. And so, I mean, I guess I should have known there's a big target on my back. and the FBI director, at least at the time when it was a transition. It was Mueller before, but then it went to Comey. I mean, these are really bad guys. And they're bad guys in many ways. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the video where Comey's talking about how they entrapped Michael Flynn.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
like, he's like, we couldn't have done it under Bush. We couldn't have done it under Clinton. But the Trump White House was a little chaotic. So I slipped a couple of guys in there. And it's quite obvious that it's like, let's entrap the guy. Let's ask him a bunch of questions and ask the same question 20 times. He's going to give an answer that in some ways contradicts an earlier answer. Oh, there we got him. He's obviously lying. This is how these people are. They're diabolical. And so, I see all these news articles that say things like Trump is doing retribution, Trump is doing vengeance. And I'm like, well, before we discuss the morality of retribution, which by the way, I support 100%. Here's my question. What is he getting retribution for? What did you do to him that makes him want retribution? If he wants vengeance, what injury have you inflicted on him that he wants to avenge? They never say what that is. So I think some retribution is like overdue. And frankly, I think it's too little right now. Comey, good, one down. What about Clapper? What about Brennan? And guess what? The big mafia bosses here, Hillary and Obama. I mean, they gave the order, right? Remember the scene from the go? Who gave the order? It wasn't Brennan and it wasn't Clapper. These are consiglieres. They carried it out. But I'm pretty confident to say that Hillary cooked up the scheme.
Oh, yeah.
Obama gave the order.
But the thing is, and this is something that has always bothered me. I wanted to see Trump do to them what they did to him. I don't care if he can get a guilty verdict. I want to see them arrested, perp walked, mug shot. I mean, they knew they weren't going to get a guilty verdict on Trump's things, even with, the rogue judges that they brought in there. They knew those things would be overturned or whatever. They just wanted that mug shot. They wanted the perp walk. They wanted everything that they could get from Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, Peter Navarro, all these people. Yet, some of the people got prison time when they shouldn't have, obviously. But I want to see him. I mean, my mat on my floor on the outside of my front door says Trump Revenge Tour 2024. That's what I wanted. I literally voted for this man for revenge on the United States government after everything that they put us through as Trump supporters, as conservatives, as Christians, and we're still being persecuted. Even with Trump being in office, we're still being persecuted because obviously, the left has embedded, people in half, if not more than half of the media, and half the country, listens to them. So, I mean,
and here I'd make a distinction that is important to keep in mind, because some people may go, you three guys, you could really listen to Erica Kirk and you're really going to learn something about Christian forgiveness. I want to emphasize that there's a great difference between an individual attitude and the job of the magistrate. So Erica Kirk is in a different position than Donald Trump. He's the magistrate. So yeah, Erica Kirk can say, as a Christian and as an individual, I forgive the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. The state cannot take that position. The state's position is, you've committed a crime against the state. At the very least, we're going to lock you up for life. We might actually electrocute you if you're convicted and if you get the death penalty. So I think what we're saying here is that, look, on an individual level, we can look at this however we want. We can decide, for example, that we're going to look the other way, but the government cannot do that. We have to officially hold these people accountable for these grave misdeeds and for breaking the law. And so we're not like the left. We're not doing exactly what they did. If we were doing exactly what they did, we would be conducting Antifa riots right now. We would have George Floyd riots right after Charlie Kirk's assassination. So we aren't doing what they did, but holding them accountable legally, that's the least we can do.
I kind of want to do what they did, though. I mean, I'm still hurt by it, James, that I want to do exactly what they did to me. I want to go. I want to go riot on everything.
Everybody.
I mean, this is what my wife says. She watched all the October 7 footage, and she goes, I actually want them to do to Hamas what Hamas did on October 7th. Right. They broke people's arms and legs. They killed kids in front of their parents. Now, Israel doesn't do that. But Debbie's like, a little part of me would like to see that, because that is, in fact, called an eye for an eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very rare that I get a chance to talk to one of the leaders of the conservative movement in America. You truly are one of the top guys. I want to ask you more of a sweeping question, if I could. How did we get here with the left? Do you blame the cultural norms have totally changed, the left has taken over, but is the education system, how did we get so far off? I was raised a liberal Democrat. I still hold the same values, Dinesh. The party left me, as many others have said. How did we get here?
So a lot of people have focused on, the left's long march through the institutions, the Alinsky strategy, the even going back earlier to the Italian communist Gramsci. I want to emphasize something very different. I think that weirdly, we have gotten the kind of left that we have because we have been the wimps that we have been. Let me put it this way. If they try to stack the court, and then we come in and we go, okay, we're going to hold it at 9. Then they go, well, our scheme failed, but we should keep trying because they're never going to do to us what we do to them. Then they mobilize the state against us and they shut down our free speech. And we come in and we go, hey, we believe in free speech for everybody. And then the left goes, wonderful. You can uphold free speech for both sides. When we come in, we'll try to shut you down again because you're never going to try to shut us down. We're never going to face the sting of you doing the same thing to us. So because we are the party of live and let live, because we are the party of the nice guys, we're the party of turn the other cheek, we're the party of, we don't want to sink that low and go in the mud pit with you. We have principles. Because we say all those things, we encourage the aggression of the left because they feel this side is weak. Therefore, let us march forward. It doesn't matter we're marching over the Bill of Rights itself. They have no scruples. They understand the language of force. The reason they're a little scared of Trump right now is that Trump is basically a little bit of a gangster the way they are. Trump is basically like, you want to be a mob boss? I'll be a mob boss. Let's play like the mob boss game here. And these guys are like, wait, you're not supposed to do that. Wait, we're not used to seeing that on the Republican side. We're used to like Mitt Romney, who's like, the gentleman's defeat. He's, he's happy he lost. He's going to hug the guy who, took it right from under him. I think we're past all that. And so I'm actually glad to see the Republican spine is being stiffened. I don't think we're quite as invertebrate as we were, let's say, circa 2008.
Was the Charlie Kirk assassination a turning point in that facet?
I think so. I think it is because it's like, listen, it's one thing to censor us and throw us off social media. It's one thing to put Dinesh in a confinement center for 8 months. I mean, this is bad. Lawfare is bad. It's also one thing to go after the president. There have been other assassination attempts, horrific though they are. But to take a kid who's out on the campus, like arguing with students and to blow him away and like put a bullet in his neck, I mean, this is beyond the pale. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that sets off a massive reaction. We have been unbelievably restrained in that reaction. And I think it's a tribute to us that we are, but we're a little changed on the inside. I'll tell you that.
For sure.
Well, yeah, and one of the things is I actually when the assassination first happened, I got the footage of when he was shot in the neck. You could see it up close, and it was obviously gushing blood. And I put that out on X, and I tried to tell everybody that it needs to go out there so we can actually wake people up. So you can see what's going on, so it can shock the conscience. Just like Jackie Kennedy, kept the pink dress on because she wanted everybody to see what they did. I want everybody to see what they did, actually wake these people up to fight back. But I think that a lot of the left's power comes from the media. And you and I had this discussion last year, and you told me that the media is trading in a lot of their trust of the, quote, championing of the people, from the past. They weren't actually the people's champion, but they all, for some reason, people thought that, like the New York Times and all these other things. And now they're trading in that trust to be able to lie to people. I mean, now they're getting less and less, obviously, powerful and less viewers, but do you think we're almost at the end, or are they still going to be able to continue to lie to half the population?
Well, they have a tremendous reach even now. You add up the 3 networks and people will say, well, they used to have 80 million, they now have 40. Well, 40 million is a lot of people. You add in NPR and PBS, that's going to be another big number of people. Then you add in like all the lies on Wikipedia, which is basically a lying machine.
Mhm.
They're like, Dinesh is a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, well, name a conspiracy. I mean, in 2000 Mules, I alleged a conspiracy. I think there actually was one. But name another conspiracy that I've ever peddled. There isn't one. I don't traffic in that kind of stuff. And so the left still has a tremendous reach. Now, I think the difference is that because of X, because of social media, we've got citizen journalists who can check them and expose them in video. So it's very powerful because we can bring up things that they said last year that are the exact opposite of what they're saying now. They rely on covering their tracks, erasing their tracks, stealth editing their old articles. But we just our guys are now onto them. We just do too many gotchas on them for them to be able to even get away with it. That's why a lot of them have sort of, they've retreated to blue sky, where on their own little platform, they can now do that and nobody really cares. But they don't get away with it on X anymore.
Well, then how come nothing ever seems to happen to these people? I mean, we always do the gotchas. We show them that, the politician said this, 6 months ago, and now they're saying something completely different. I mean, there's actually people out there that are dedicated to showing what they've said on X maybe last year is the exact opposite of what they're saying now, but nothing ever happens to these people. There's never any accountability. And this is what scares me about the 2026 midterms. I, along with James, along with many millions of people, voted for accountability, retribution. We voted for justice, and we haven't gotten that. And if we don't get it by 2026, I have a feeling that the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And the big problem with that, Eric Swalwell just today came out and said exactly what their plan is. Their plan is to investigate and target private citizens that helped Donald Trump if they win the 2026 midterms. That is exactly what Swalwell said today. What do you think about that?
Well, what it really says is that the Democrats, they threw everything at Trump. And they fell short. I don't think that they thought they would, but a few things didn't go their way. Now, Biden, I think, was largely comatose from the beginning, but they had a pretty good ventriloquist act going in which they were able to use him as a prop. And a bunch of their gang, I would say the Obama gang, was making all the decisions. Unfortunately, in the debate, Biden couldn't help it. He started squealing and gasping and it was too much. And people realized this guy's basically like gone and he wants to run the country for the next 4 years. So the kind of the whole scam was up. So then they had to so this spoiled their orchestrated strategy, which by the way worked in 2020, but it didn't work in 2024. So they're really bummed about that. But they haven't given up on the general strategy. And so you are right. What we have to do is crush their strategy and make them feel so much pain over it that they realize that, listen, look, I want to make a general point here, because a lot of Americans think that our security in the end comes from the Constitution. And this is not true. The Constitution is a piece of paper. And so if our security came from the Constitution, how is it the Biden regime was able to run roughshod over our rights? By ignoring the Constitution. Yeah. So the real security, if you read carefully what the founders are saying, the real security of your rights in the country comes from the healthy fear that the majority and the minority both have of each other. And ultimately, we do have that fear because we know what they can do to us. They don't have that fear because we have not done it to them. So this is why I think that, quote, standing on principle and so on is worthless. I think that we have to actually go full sling blade on them, politically speaking. And once they realize that, listen, you can take away our rights, but we can take away yours. So be a little careful before you try to do stuff to us, because we're quite capable and entirely willing to pay you back in kind. Then they're going to go, whoa. Remember when Elon Musk threw a bunch of leftist journalists off of X for one day? Suddenly, these people are like, what about our free speech? Let me quote John Stuart Mill in On Liberty. He says, blah, blah, blah. So suddenly they become like vehement defenders of free speech. Why? Because their free speech rights are being trampled.
They are the ultimate hypocrites, just like with the Jimmy Kimmel thing. He was taken off by a private company, no less, but yet they say that it was Trump and it was these people that had him taken off, even though his viewership is terrible and some of the things he said were horrible. I mean, but it seems like even though they're a minority within the left that are, very progressive and very loud, it seems like their microphone is the one that's amplified. The people that can be the most insane, the most out there, the craziest seem to be the ones that get to be amplified and be on the news and be, all over. And that's where they're shared and viral and all these things. I mean, how do we stop that from happening because that's their main power. If we could take that away, they have nothing.
So let's look at the root of that power. It lies in the difference between their billionaires and our billionaires. Their billionaires bankroll the far left. Yep. They bankroll Antifa, they bankroll Act Blue. There's no such thing as being too far left. And their billionaires are on board. They're on board with the trans agenda and all of it. Our billionaires are uncomfortable. And so our billionaires back the rhinos against the right. I can tell you there are so many guys like in Texas, they come here, Dinesh, I want to run for Congress. I got the grassroots behind me. I go, yeah, but do you have $2 million? I go, because guess what? Your opponent's going to be some business guy who only cares about, tax cuts and a couple of other things. But this guy he's a millionaire and he's got 10 other buddies and each of them are going to put $100,000 into his race. And you need to compete with him. He's going to be on the airwaves calling you a lunatic and an extremist. And so what I'm getting at is that our money goes toward the center right and their money goes toward the far left.
True.
But why do they bankroll those things? I mean, say you're an average white American male and you're a billionaire. Why do you bankroll anti-white racism? Why do you bankroll transgender things? Why do you bankroll Antifa burning down cities? What is the goal?
The goal is, this is a topic for another day, but because there's so much involved, right? I think here's what it is. The left basically offers you a trade. They go, not only are we okay with you making money, we will use the government to funnel money your way. You will have oceans of cash available to you because we'll create climate change initiatives and give you $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Not our money, of course, but it's the taxpayers' money, but we'll make sure it goes your way. That's number one. Number two, a lot of these left-wing, particularly tech billionaires, are very leftist from their college days. They're bohemians, they're pot smokers, they identify culturally with the left. And because they have a ton of money, whether the top tax rate is 37% or 39%, they could care less. They don't even make money in a salaried way. Their stocks have gone up in value and they haven't sold them yet, so they haven't paid any taxes on it. So what I'm getting at is these guys, they realize the amount of cultural trophies that come from the left. In other words, how do you get on the board of the Kennedy Center? How do you get the Academy Award? How do you get to go to the Beyonce concert and go backstage? So the left controls these trophies. And when people make a lot of money, they attach a great value. My wife is on the museum board. I've got a building named after me at Columbia. We don't have these trophies to offer, and the left does. The far left does.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into a discussion about who was it, Yuri Brezhnev and postmodernism and, the Marxist light and how they said the Soviets said they'd take over America without ever firing a shot. And I'm sure it's very deep, but you're right. I think a lot of it is just, it seems that all of the important aspects of our society have been overtaken by the left. And I know we're fighting back, but Dinesh, what's the game plan? I mean, we've got a few minutes. What is the game plan? Yeah, we need to win the midterms. And I know, as one of our commenters said, I think it woke a lot of people up. I think you're going to see a massive red wave, the Charlie Kirk assassination in the midterms. But beyond that, and beyond what Trump is doing, what do we citizens need to be doing?
Well, I think we need to take the full measure of the left. We need to build rival institutions. That's probably Charlie's greatest contribution. Look, Charlie was not like an intellectual. Charlie's real strength was organizational. Charlie didn't convert these young people to the right. Here's what I'm saying. These young people basically saw the debris of the left. They were raised in it. They're raised in cultural decay, broken families, the ritual abuse of the white male heterosexual. This has been going on for like decades. And these young people are just furious and angry, and they're moving to the right, but they never had a respectable vehicle. Everywhere they go, they're demonized, they're ostracized, they're treated like everything they say is hate speech. And then along comes Turning Point, and they go, listen, here's a forum for you to be with like-minded people at an annual conference. You can hear all these speakers. So it's like, phew, what a relief. How fantastic. You know, I'm almost like one of the Christians in the catacombs, and now I can kind of come out into St. Peter's Cathedral. Wow. So Turning Point created a forum for that. And that was really the genius of Charlie Kirk at his young age. So we need to focus. We have a lot of pundits. We have a lot of theories. You know, ultimately the end for me, you know, I don't just like talk about films. I make them. You know, I actually get it done. I put them in the theater. So we need to get it done. And this is the Trump is good at this. He's a construction guy. You know, he understands that even with Gaza, in the end, it's about producing new buildings and new jobs and clean apartments and cops on the street. And so if we can deliver in some of these cities and people see what a Republican city looks like versus a Democratic city, I mean, it's not going to be a hard choice before the American people, right? It's sort of like, do you want to live in Singapore or do you want to live in Haiti?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why I don't understand how Democrats, even with their poll numbers as low as, I mean, almost as low as they could possibly be, they continue to push these things. I mean, and I don't know if they have to push these things in order to get the billionaires, because you said just the same way they do, you know, they would funnel our taxpayer money to them. They've done it, you know, for decades, and they've been doing it now, you know, with the whole, you saw how the whole FTX thing in Ukraine, where they would, you know, give money to Ukraine would get half that money to FTX, who would funnel it back through Act Blue and the Democrats, and then they obviously give it out to their friends in NGOs. But so why do they continue to push wildly unpopular policies, do you think?
Because in certain areas, even the ruin is greatly to their benefit. So let's take, for example, San Francisco, right? San Francisco has these magnificent buildings, incredible scenery, you're right on the bay. You have nice weather, very temperate, right?
Great restaurants,
great restaurants, like a tourist mecca. So then you ask, you know, if you're Democrats and you're running the place, like, why would you run it into the ground? Like, what do you gain by having homeless guys go up to people in restaurants and like grab their chicken wing off their plate? Like, you'd think even if you're a Democrat, you'd be like, that's horrible. We need to stop that. But the way the Democrats look at it is, all right, guess what? If we can chase away the entrepreneurs from these buildings, then these buildings will plummet in value. Right? They will go down to zero. And think of it, they're high rent buildings. If suddenly a place which costs $30,000 a month and you can't fill it because companies are moving out, suddenly that building is available for $2 million, a building that probably is worth $500 million. So Democrats will go, well, we'll grab it, we'll scoop it up. So there's a lot of, it's sort of like carcasses are really good for like jackals. You know, they feast off of them. And so for the Democrats, it's like they've ruined Oakland. But by ruining Oakland, they now control the school board. They control all the appointments of teachers. That's a lot of jobs for the left. So all these like assistant professors coming out of Oakland State. I mean, these are people who don't know anything. All they know is like racial slogans and reparations now and so on. But guess what? Then you get a position on the city council and suddenly you find that you're in the small business administration and you're handing out government contracts and you get to hand them out to your friends. So the left feasts off of the decay in the cities that they've created. This is what Mamdani will do in New York. He doesn't care. Look, a guy who robs a bank, right? You can't say to him, listen, don't rob the bank, because if you rob the bank, if everybody started robbing banks, people would get really scared. No one would put their money in banks and the banking system will go down. The thief could care less about it. And he's like, let the banking system go down. In the meantime, I'm going to keep robbing banks as long as there's money for me to take. And this is how the left is. They will run the country into the ground as long as they can. And they'll think about their next plan once they have already lifted all the spoils off of the ground.
Yeah, and it's amazing because one of the things that I think that I kind of think that they do is the whole drive away campaign, where they do these policies and they drive away all the common sense people out of New York, out of New York City, out of everywhere else. The only people that are left are people that are going to vote for their policies again, so they can stay in power that way too. Don't you think?
Exactly. I mean, I think we're on to these guys now. Look, there's no question that they have a constituency, right? And their constituency is a disgraceful constituency. I mean, it's essentially a constituency of thieves and criminals and illegals and freaks and perverts. I mean, this is they're hoping that they can get that group up to 50%.
That's true.
It's not there yet, but they're working on it. That's why they rely on the indoctrination. They want to take nice kids who are a little confused about themselves. The girl who's a tomboy, tell her you're a boy. The guy who's like not fully accepted on the football field, they're like, you're a girl. So they're playing with fire. They're taking people's natural vulnerabilities. And remember, again, there's money in it for them. There's a therapist who's making money. There's a hospital making money with surgery. And of course, they want the taxpayer to fund it. And then they want to fund gender surgeries in prison, where the male criminals go, it'd be kind of nice for me to make my way over to the women's prison. I'm going to change my name from Dinesh to Denise, and come on, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to put on a dress. I'm ready to head over to the women's prison where things are a little kind of softer than they are right here, in Huntsville, Texas. So yeah, I mean, this is just a despicable group of people. I think that our big insight, and we can maybe close on this and kind of just close back up on the film, is we used to think in the Reagan years that our opponents were merely misguided. We spent a lot of energy trying to educate them. Now we have to realize that they are misguided, a lot of them, but a lot of them are just downright wicked. I mean, they are just basically tools of the dragon, willing tools of the dragon. And so that's one area where the dragon's prophecy does not hold back. It's that this is not just about, there's an element of deception because Satan is the deceiver. But basically the choice at the end of the day is, are you with God or are you with the dragon? Yeah. And if you just apply that lens to your own life and you look at politics through that lens, without even telling you what to think about this or that, I'm not telling you what to think about Israel or Netanyahu. You can figure all that out for yourself, but the film is going to give you a political and a moral and a spiritual framework to think about it, and you're going to be better for seeing it, really, regardless of how you think about these issues.
Tell us one more time before you go, where do people get tickets?
thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. That's the website. Okay. Theater tickets there, pre-orders for DVDs, pre-orders for the streaming. So October 6th and 8th in the theater, and then October 9th, streaming and DVD.
That's awesome. Dinesh, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great honor, and hopefully we can do it again down the road. The film
Let's make it happen.
Yep, we'll do it. The film's The Dragon's Prophecy. You've been watching Secret America. I'm James Clary. He's Jack Danger, and that's Dinesh D'Souza. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Secret America with Jack Danger and James Clary.